Right, welcome back. This is Ali Malani, Politics Uncensored on Fubar Radio. We're delighted now to have Anna Holland joining us, a spokesperson from Just Stop Oil, climate change activist based in Newcastle. One of the campaigners who you might have seen on social media throw the soup at the Van Gogh painting Sunflowers and glue themselves to the wall. She was arrested but later released on bail, and her trial is scheduled for 2024. Anna, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
What kind of soup did you throw at the Van Gogh? What was it?
It was Heinz cream of tomato.
Oh, cream of tomato. I like cream of tomato. Listen, thank you so much for joining us. One of the first questions I'm going to ask you, and you know what it's going to be, the main criticism of Just Stop Oil, yourself, has been the nature of your actions to raise both awareness and disruption on the issue of climate change. We've spent most of the show today talking about the existential crisis that is climate change. And so for those who have come through this journey with us, minor disruptions might seem reasonable, given that the entire planet is on fire. But what would you say to critics who say you go too far?
Absolutely. So the criticism that, people will agree with our cause but not our methods is one of the most common criticisms I ever get. And it's often paired with, you should try going on marches or signing petitions or contacting your local member of parliament. And the fact of the matter is, I spent 4 years of my life organising marches and attending them and signing more petitions than I can count and contacting my local member of parliament so much I think that he's entirely sick of me. And in those 4 years, all my effort and all my energy achieved absolutely nothing. And then after just a year of taking direct disruptive action with Just Stop Oil, we got more people than ever talking about the climate crisis. And every single political party in the UK, apart from the Tories and the entire Scottish government, have agreed with our demand of no new oil and gas.
Mm-hmm. So, look, you've taken quite a personal step as well, because obviously you're now on trial, so there's personal ramification of that. What got you to that moment where you thought, screw it, I have to take serious direct action here, even if it's detrimental to my own personal life, but something's got to be done. What's the sort of journey that got you to that point?
I first became worried about the climate crisis when I was 13, so in 2015, when the 2015 Paris Agreement was signed. And since that moment, I've watched every year as our government has not only ignored the climate crisis, but have actively fueled it and fueled the destruction of my future for their own personal wealth. So last year, we had the worst heat wave that the UK's ever seen. And in just 2 days, over 1,700 people were killed by something that the government could have very easily prevented. I've watched our government take genocidal measures, and I've felt utterly powerless against that. So it got to a point where I couldn't allow myself to just sit by and watch them continue to destroy my future and the future of my little sisters. I would never have been able to look them in the eye again if I didn't take any kind of action to protect their future.
Yeah, look, some of the criticisms that have come, particularly Just Stop Oil's way, has been that it's predominantly, middle-class, wealthy people who have a little bit too much time on their hands. I don't subscribe to that view, but I want you to give a chance to really hit back at those kind of criticisms.
In Just Stop Oil, I've sat on roads alongside every single kind of person. I myself am a university student. I get by only on the maintenance loan that comes in from the government. And I've been sat on the road next to construction workers, next to teachers, next to priests, next to doctors, next to any sort of person you can imagine, because the climate crisis is going to affect all of us, regardless of our social class. And even though they would like to ignore it, it is also going to affect the conservatives and oil executives who are killing us. So because the climate crisis is going to affect all of us, it doesn't discriminate on class or gender or race, we all need to come together in this fight against it.
And so, there's not the soup throwing incident, because that was unique. But there's been instances of people gluing themselves onto roads and disrupting traffic. And a lot of people hit by that will be working class people who are just trying to, make money to survive. And so some of the criticisms has been that you're attacking the wrong people. You're attacking people, not the people who are making the decisions, the power brokers in Westminster, but rather the ordinary Joe who's trying to get to work. What would be your response to that?
And I agree that this is absolutely horrible that we do have to disrupt just ordinary everyday people like ourselves when they're just trying to get to work, they're just trying to make a living. But we have tried disrupting the oil industry before. Last April, Just Stop Oil went to the oil industry and we blocked oil terminals, oil tankers. We trespassed onto oil pipelines, and no one heard about it. Nothing changed because of it. Because unfortunately, with the state of mainstream media today, journalists will not report on us unless we disrupt the public. It is the only measure that we can take that will get climate crisis into the conversation where it needs to be.
Yeah, I think there seems to be, and it's not just with the environmental stuff. To me, there seems to be a fundamental misunderstanding of what protest is. And it's not just, like I said, environmental crisis, but there's people marching for all sorts of issues. And we seem to keep coming back in the media with, but you're causing too much disruption. Isn't that the point of protest?
Exactly. Women didn't get the vote by voting for it.
So let's come to a slightly different topic surrounding Just Stop Oil and the climate activist movement. It's something that I have felt and seen, and that is there seems to be a little bit of a gap of people of color being involved in the climate movement, given that predominantly the global south is going to be affected at least first, if not more, than us here in the UK. It doesn't seem like the climate movement is representative of that. What would you say about that?
Absolutely. And in fact, the global south is being affected now because of the climate crisis. And I think it is horrible that, the climate crisis movement, or at least in Just Stop Oil, we are a predominantly white organisation, but unfortunately, our methods do involve us risking arrest and risking getting criminal records and dealing with the police. And as a white person, I am incredibly privileged that that is something that will not have as traumatizing an effect on me as a person of color would have to deal with police.
So do you think in some ways, maybe you're saying, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that you're using that privilege to raise the issue because you're able to, whereas if a person of color was to have that level of engagement with police, the outcomes might be very different?
Essentially, yeah. I would feel horrible if I didn't take action and a person of color took action and ended up having some traumatic interaction with the police. It's, as I say, as a white person, I'm in a much better position to be able to get arrested and have that interaction with the judiciary system, which has been proven time and time again to discriminate horribly against people of color.
But I guess equally, the fact that so many of these climate activist organizations are predominantly white also means issues like the refugee crisis, which you cannot, detach from the climate crisis, the refugee crisis. Issues such as the racism that exists in a lot of our the policies that are passed by the government surrounding climate crisis, things like reparations and other things. They're just not talked about as much as the soup throwing, for example, because these organizations are so white. So does there not need to be a serious move within the climate organizations and activists to make sure that these groups and organizations are more representative so that these issues can be spoken about?
No, absolutely. Now, of course, I can't speak for the entire climate movement. So Just Stop Oil is just sort of seen as a project within the wider movement. So our only focus is stopping oil and gas in the UK. But it's an impact that the climate crisis, just 20 years down the line, is going to cause not just millions of deaths, but billions of climate refugees. And when we are faced with the refugee crisis that we have today, and with asylum seekers in the UK being horribly abused by the system, it's only going to get exponentially worse if we don't try and stop climate crisis now. So, of course, that conversation needs to be had, and we need to shift that conversation. But, as I say, Just Stop Oil is one project is only focused on oil and gas in the UK. That's a conversation for the wider climate movement.
Yeah. And so Extinction Rebellion recently have announced that they're going to be moving away from using public disruptions as a protest tactic. Is that something Just Stop Oil are thinking about, or are you guys in a different frame of mind?
Absolutely not. We're going to continue with disruptive actions until the government meets our demand of no new oil and gas. It's the only thing that we can do to win this fight.
What are you planning next? You're going to give me a little hint.
I
Does
can't
it
give
involve
too many
soup?
details. I haven't heard anything about soup. I try to avoid that word as much as possible now.
Okay, so one of the last questions. The disruption is one element, the protest is one element, but surely there has to be a move towards turning this this drive into votes. Is there a way that we can make the climate issue not only on the mainstream agenda on the news and us talking about it here on the radio show, but a key component of the next general election? Is that something that's in the minds of at Just Stop Oil? Is not just how much disruption can we cause, but can we turn this disruption into a key debating point when the two next candidates of Prime Minister stand on stage and discuss their plans for the future?
Well, we have already seen that shift begin to take place. You know, as I say, no new oil and gas is on the political manifestos of every single party apart from the Conservatives. But unfortunately, we are at a place in the climate crisis, but we can't wait as long as the next general election for action to be taken. We simply don't have that time. You know, scientists have predicted that by 2025, by 2035 even, just 12 years into the future, the summer that we just had, where 1,700 people were killed in 2 days, where crops caught fire in the fields and apples baked on the trees, in just 12 years' time, that's going to become an average summer. And we won't be able to survive that. That is a blatant fact. That is unsurvivable. And so with that, just 12 years down the line, I'll only be 33 by that time. We don't have time to just sit and wait for the next election. Change needs to happen now. So even though there has been positive progress in other political parties, we need the Conservatives who are currently in power to make that change.
And so let's pretend I was Rishi Sunak, Lord forgive me, and you were talking directly to the Prime Minister, or I was Keir Starmer and I could potentially be the next Prime Minister, and you had a couple of demands of things I absolutely had to do. What would you say to me?
First of all, if I was talking to Rishi Sunak right now, I would say
keep it PG. Yeah, let's.
Yes,
no,
absolutely.
I'm joking. You can swear. We're all right with that.
If I was talking to Rishi Sunak, I would say, how dare you be so arrogant as to think that your personal bank account is the only thing that's important. You weren't voted in by the population. You were voted in by 202 of your own party members. You do not represent my views. You do not represent the views of my generation. You do not represent the views of anyone other than your own circle of friends. So if you want to see the disruption of Just Stop Oil come to an end, because I know we are getting to you, I know we are making you angry and nervous and frightened, just like I am angry and frightened about my future, you will stop new oil and gas. All the leading scientists are telling you to stop oil and gas. The IPCC report is saying it, the UN, the International Energy Agency. Listen to your own scientists, listen to anyone other than your own financial advisor and the oil executives who are greasing your pockets. Do the right thing and protect the children of your country.
And what about if I was Keir Starmer of the Labour Party?
I would say you are not doing enough. You have put an end to oil and gas in your political manifesto, but you are not backing the striking workers right now. You are not backing disruptive protests. Those are the foundations of the Labour movement. If you come into power, you need to act on your promise to end oil and gas, and you need to do it fast because we are running out of time, and it's terrifying.
Okay, thank you so much, Anna, for joining us. I'm really appreciative of your time. That was Anna Holland, spokesperson for Just Stop Oil.